that there's a lot of them,
Yep.
how do I focus on the one that's more important? Like what I'm trying to do and in my head, and tell me if I'm doing the right, if this is the right, on the right path, is like for each of the knowledge areas or each of the steps in those knowledge area, whether it's, you know, the 5 steps in risk or whatever, like if I'm doing the identify risk, what's the, do I need to focus basically on what the input and the output, or just think of what is it that you want to get out of this process? Right. Does that make sense to understand it that way, to make it more sense? Because I think I get hung up in all the different documents and different stuff that comes out of each process. I think that's my biggest.
Okay, that's easy. I would just focus on the outputs. Like that's where I would start. Like there's like 1,400 plus, you know, components. Like I don't think about very many of them, honestly. And so the way we work through it is I'd start with the outputs always. Okay. And so what are we trying to produce for each process? So we treat each process like a little baby factory. And I'm trying to always understand like the bigger picture of like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the purpose of it?
Okay.
And I try to identify the 1 or 2 max outputs that I'm producing in this process. Like it's a factory, it makes hot dogs or Teslas or something in between. What are we doing here? And so like you said, risk, like identify risk. We'd say a risk register right at the beginning. Like,
right.
Yeah, we have a bunch of risks. We want to put them on a list. Okay, that's great. That's what we're trying to do. And then as we work ourselves back, I don't spend a ton of time like diving and I don't memorize anything, trying to figure out, like, I just kind of work backwards from that to say, before I even look at the ITO, say, what would I need to do to build a list? And you'd say, well, I don't know. You'd probably need to bring people together. You'd probably need to like have a meeting. You'd probably maybe do some brainstorming. I don't know. You'd probably group things together. I don't know. You just try to frame it in your brain to be like, this is what I might do. And then by doing that, you go back and kind of look at the ITO and you say like, oh, what did they say in the tools and techniques that you do? You say, oh, okay, that makes sense. And you just got to kind of get a general understanding. And your goal is not to like, they said 7 things, I have to put 7 things in my brain. I don't think that's useful. And so you just say like, oh, that makes sense. What are the big things that they're saying? Like, are there anything that doesn't seem logical to me? They're going to throw a lot of information out there that's going to be, I don't know, OPAs and EEFs and all these things and the outputs and inputs and stuff. Those are kind of standard boilerplate things. They're important, but we want to focus on the big picture stuff. Like, what are we doing in each one of them? And you don't have to master it each time. And so as we go through and do that, we're just kind of like, for identifying risk, like if we went back and looked at it, we would say risk register, all these details on the output, what's driving that, and then what would we need basically as an input. And so each one of them, like I'll pull up, let me see if I can pull something. We'll walk through it.
And then while you're doing that, let me ask if this is also what I was thinking too. So focusing on risk, I mean, looking at risk right now. So basically the output, the way I'm trying to frame it in my head when I was walking today is whatever the output is for each of these processes becomes the input for the next process. Would that be a good analogy, or that's too complicated? Like, so the risk register is an output for the identifier risk. So for the qualitative analysis, would the risk register be an input for that to try to determine which ones are more, you know?
So I think what we want to do is we want to go on a path of discovery while we do this. And I think that's what, so as you're explaining things and I'm trying to think about like how to think through these things, if we just go and say, I'm going to try to memorize everything that they put down, we're not really trying to understand or going through like a path of discovery. So you're testing a theory in what you laid out. Hey, the output that I produce and identify risks, whatever it is, risk register, et cetera, might that be an input in the next one? Okay, potentially, yes. And so let's go through the thing. Like in our site, we have this thing my partner created called a PM1 view. It's an interactive tool that allows us to kind of jump in and test these theories. So if we come down here in planning and risk and we click on identify risk, then boom, the ITO pops
Oh my
up.
goodness.
Yeah, amazing, right? And so, it's really cool because what he saw was me doing all those, like, flip through a book, rip them out, get frustrated, reorganize, like, and then go, is this and that, and holding 2 pages up, like, nah. They're, through science and technology, things are easier. So here's the risk register. Great, that's an output there. Now, what we talked about is, before we go into the next process, we're saying, all right, what are we trying to accomplish? So every time I look at a process, I want to think about how I'm using my time and using my computing power in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, why am I in, and we'll do this together right now. Why am I in identify risks? So let's take a teensy step back and say we're in the planning process. Why would I even, you help me out here, Jan, like why would I invest my time to identify risks in planning? Why? Why would I do that?
Because I basically want to know what the risks are, so we can plan for them, so that when they happen, we have a plan to figure out how to resolve it or to mitigate or whatever we want to do with it. So we just want to know.
Yeah, we want to know. And so you're saying, like, we're going to make a decision in planning, which is fairly logical. It's a super logical. The PMP is super logical. Like, I don't teach anymore with like all these ITOs and stuff. We just logically talk through things over and over and break it down, because at the end of the day, once, through our little 5-minute conversation right now, my goal is to have you look at risk. You've already seen me teach it a bunch of different times, different ways, but then go,
I like your funnel, by the way.
Yeah, the funnel is just a way that in my mind that makes sense. Like,
yes.
And so there's ways to break these things down. What essentially that is like a mental model. And what you have in your brain and I have in our brain and everybody out there has mental models are ways to organize content so that it makes sense to us.
Right.
And so that's all we're doing. We're saying the funnel's example. So you explained to me logically, which is great. Hey, we're gonna invest time and resources in planning so that we can understand what our risks look like. And if we do that, we're going to have to do a little bit more deeper thinking. We're going to have to think about which ones are most important. We're going to have to plan for them. We're going to have to cost them out. We're going to have to like make sure that we have people that are ready to act on these risks. And we're also going to have people later in the process, they're going to be looking for them, because we don't want to just plan and not do anything. So that's cool. But right now you said identify risks, as we jump back in, we're going to have a big, long list of risks. And that's where when we go to the output, we go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Risk register. Okay, that's the big, long list with the details right off the bat. All right? And so the question that I ask then is to say, like, okay, so we know we're going to get there. How would we get there? So we'll take it off the screen. By what means would you, if we were working a project together, we say we know we got to get to a big, long list of risks. How would we do it? Like, what would you and I do there to get that big, long list?
We'd have to have a conversation, like have meetings or, talk to somebody.
Okay. So we might have meetings. Like if we had to hit it from a couple different angles, what would we do in the meetings? How would we get the conversations going? Tell me more. How might we
we have a meeting. Okay. So guys, you've basically have done work on, projects before. What are some of the risks that you encountered? What are some of the things that happened that we need to be aware of?
Okay, so we might brainstorm and we might throw that around there.
Yeah.
So we're making, like, as we're doing this and we're running through these thought experiments in our head, one of the good exercises is just take a blank sheet of paper and kind of jot down. We said meetings. We said brainstorming. What if you got into a room and everybody was like, I don't know. What might you do to spawn their brains? What could we do?
It's a good point, because I've facilitated this meeting so many times. It's funny enough, I've never really had a conversation where people. Okay, so if they have documents, hopefully they had documents from before that they can share.
Might say, let's dive down into the documents, see if we can find some risk there. We might also, so that in a sense, you're prompting them. You're saying, hey, let's look at the documents. Or what kind of risk could be related to the schedule or cost stuff or weather or whatever. You're prompting them. Yeah, it might have like a prompt kind of cues or list or something. You might have like a checklist of things to go through. There might be a bunch of different ways. And you might group the risks or something. So as we've done that little thought experiment, we go back to the little thing. We say, all right, what do they have? Well, they said, we're going to bring in expert judgment. All right, that makes sense. Smart people who know things. Total logic. Data gathering, as we see patterns, they're saying gather, analyze, communicate. What do we have? Brainstorm. That's pretty simple. Yeah, we're going to talk about it. We're going to use checklists maybe. Like that's kind of like prompting and like going through what things to look for risks. We might go out and interview smart people. That's pretty simple. And then we might analyze. We might look at root cause, ways that things could fail, stuff like that. Our assumptions and constraints, our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. That's SWOT. We might look at documents. You talked about that. Like all that. And then we might facilitate or do prompts and meetings. Like literally, you just talked about all those things. We just talked.
And I didn't even see that you had there. I didn't even read that what you had there.
Yeah. You didn't even see it. So I mean, like the thing is, you could write the PMBOK. Like you could do it. It would help if I facilitated it with you, but like you just went through and did that. Okay, cool. Now here's where people get lost. They go, all right, I like this. We're going output back to tool and technique. Let me go back to inputs. And then they look to the side and they go, oh my God, how is resource management plan or assumption? Basically they're saying, bunch of documents are on the table. Bring it all in. I don't think it's useful to go detailed into that.
And you need all of these documents, right?
Yeah, we're just basically saying we're going to look for risks everywhere.
Right.
That's how I summarize this section to the left. I'm going to look everywhere for risks.
Yes.
Because everywhere risk might bite me. Great. All right. But I'm going to do it in a methodical way. So we've mastered identify risk. And we know that big, long list, risk register, a report over time that's just going to summarize how we're doing. Because risk evaluation and manipulation never ends. So that's good. So as we go down deeper and deeper and deeper, that's the way that I think that we can cut tons of time out of the way we study and we can be much more effective if we just focus on the outputs and then logic ourselves to how it works.
Yes.
Now I've somehow morphed into teaching mode here, but and so what you said here was, is the risk register a feeder for the next one, the next process?
Or the report.
The reports. I don't know. I mean, I do, but I don't know. Play the game. First of all, does it make sense that the risk register would be an input to qualitative risk analysis?
Yes, it does make sense because that's where we have documented all the risks that we think may happen.
Okay. And then when we get into qualitative, why, you sold me a little bit on why, but really why in qualitative do we need that list? Why? I don't understand. Why? Because
we want to be able to determine the risk which going to have the most impact.
Okay.
Because not all risk we're going to pay attention to, right? Some things that you can deal with and some things that you can't. So you're going to focus on the one that's going to have the most impact to the business, whether it's negatively or not, or to the project. So that's why you have to be able to qualify them. Which one's more important? I guess I don't know.
Okay. So we got to bring that long list so we can make those determinations, probability, impact, and stuff. So the raw materials for us, it sounds logical that risk register would be in it. Now, we said we're on a path of discovery in a sense, instead of just leading along a path of despair and mindless studying, we want to go let's go look at the IDO with a purpose now. Right. So we're going to go back to the IDO as we click in qualitative here, and we're going to say, is our risk register there? We think it's going to be there, but let's unearth it and see what's there. So as we go there, look at right there. Bam. The risk register is there. Bam. It's
overthinking a lot of things. I think I overthink things too much.
I think a lot of people do. And I do too. But what we got to do is go and understand oh, it's there. Awesome. Well, just because there's 12 people in a line, I don't know if this metaphor is going to work. All of them don't hold the same weight. Or there's a lot of things that are here. Are there other things here is that the most important input is what the question I was trying to get to? Or are they all the same importance? Another thing. That's how we discern ourselves. So we're trying to say risk register. I think that's a top one, a king one, a queen one, up there at the top. What are these other things? Assumption log. Okay, that kind of supports. Stakeholder register. All right, that supports. The risk management plan tells us how we're going to deal with doing the qualitative. when they just blankly say EFs and OPAs, it's just like, okay, I know, contractually or something, they had to throw that in there for just so that they don't forget those words. But like, I kind of like those, I'm snowblind to those. I don't even see them anymore. And so really when I see here, what's the big input? Okay, it's risk register. Great. That's the big input. So yes, it does flow. And then I'm going to go to the other thing about like, what's our output again? We know you told me what you sold me on what we're trying to produce here and understanding what's most valuable and what's not by probability impact. So are we going to create, just logically, are we going to create anything new here? Any new documents in qualitative risk analysis?
Doesn't look like it.
Oh, I don't know about looking. What does it feel like? What does it seem like? Tell me what, like in your mind, like, are we going to or not logically?
No, we're still using the same document to qualify the risk or to rank them. So no.
Okay, I like the no. Yeah, and so we're not going to create anything new. We're just going to like deepen our understanding. And
that's
so
my final answer. No.
Yeah, that's your final answer. That's good. So as we go in and look with like purpose, as I click on the wrong one, we'd say, oh, nothing's new. Well, that's good. But here we're going to update our risk register, maybe our report, maybe issues we find while we're doing stuff, assumptions. But the king or queen one in there is the risk register. That's the big one. All right, great. And then we do the same game over in our path of discovery. What would get us there? And so we could do this over and over and over. And so before we get lost in all this stuff, we'd close the book and we'd ask ourselves, what do I need to get to an understanding of probability and impact?
Right.
Well, I don't know. Let's just do it one more time, like for fun. What would you and I need if we didn't have the book, if my mouse was broken and I couldn't click on this thing, what would we need to do to get to probability and impact? What do you think?
Would need something to help us to rank them.
True. So we need some mechanism or method to do it. So that's cool.
And we could also, I don't know if I'm just throwing this out because I'm thinking of my accounting guy that I used to talk to when I have to do the budget. Like basically talk to other people who have done it. Like probably we'll have some conversation. I don't know. Like, hey, these are some of these are what we have for these risks.
Yep.
How do you want to, and we've ranked them, how do you want to approach resolving them or planning for them, I guess.
Love it. Yeah. And so that is good. Yeah. Got anything else? So we're going to bring people together. We're going to have some ranking system. We're going to go bring smart people in. We're going to dive down into it, meetings and facilitation, all those kind of things. There might be some more, and we might go dry in our brain to go like, I don't know really what else, but that's okay. And so we go and click on it and we say, what do they have? Well, they got a lot of what we said. Expert judgment, same stuff. Interviews, we might go talk to smart people. Great. There's nothing like crazy here. We don't need to memorize that. Like it's just there. And then when we get into like analyzing, this is where I think where might be useful. Like we're just trying to find little places in these IDOs that we can grab hold of and say, that's worth thinking about. And so here it's like, the risk data quality assessment. That's like a lot of works for like, I don't know. I don't even know what it means. Like, to evaluate.
It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff, but you got the feeling. The risk probability impact assessment. So we're just looking at impact in the set, probability and impact. We already knew that. Great. Assessment of other risk parameters. Okay. It's not only risk, impact, and what other thing we might look at, like how important it is to certain, politically or culturally or whatever, it's like something else related to risk. So there may be another angle to this. Who knows? So that's okay. Facilitation. Yep. That's how we get to there. Categorization. Yep. We're going to group them. That makes sense. And then probability and impact matrix. That's how it visually is going to be shown up. So, all right. I think I got this down. We're just going to go into it, understand it more, rank them, look at it maybe from a different angle. But then at the end of the day, get a better understanding.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then, so we could go over and over and over. And if you lead yourself through here, it's a lot easier with somebody facilitating with you. I'll be honest. But but you can do this yourself and anybody else can do it. The thing to do as we work through is to think, okay, Let's just try to bring it all together real quick. We're not studying for the sake of studying. We're studying for the sake of understanding, to be able to answer difficult questions and have better like perception to operate in a real world as well.
Yeah.
So there's two sides of it. So when we think through the IDOs, the questions never ask us like, what is the 7 IDO or inputs on blah, blah, blah. That's just not the way it asks.
Right.
It says, hey, you're in a spot, you did something wrong or something's going bad, or you have new risks or something. You've identified new risks. You're halfway through the project. What do you do now?
Right.
And so if you understand basically the flow and the reason, like in this, hey, we're halfway through a project, things are going okay, but we've identified a new risk. Okay, cool. Then you're going to think back to say, well, I know the first thing we do is we identify the risk. Great. Then we rank it, see where it falls. Then if it keeps, it's high enough of importance, then we go down and quantitatively analyze it, put it into the whole risk profile for the project. It may shift things, who knows? And then if it's still of super concern, we'll plan around it. And if it's super big, we might need to get people involved and do change requests and whatever to the project. But we're going to go methodically through that.
Right.
So you can use that to answer questions. And so, yeah, that's how I think you can use your time more judiciously and productively while you study.
Yeah, I totally agree. So my plan or my thought is I'm just going to go through each of those areas just the way I went through the risk. I'm going to go back and start over with scope from a fresh perspective and focus on the outputs and try to understand it and then go from there. And then I do just in time testing and not wait to get through. Don't try to make it more overwhelming than it actually is, because it is a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, I mean, thought through this a good amount. And so it does take time, and that you got to give yourself like a license or whatever to make mistakes and to not know things perfectly and to iterate to your better place. And so, as we look at this chart, 49 up and downs processes, we just want to go, hey, what are big chunks that are important? This is a big chunk where we make a baseline in the scope neighborhood. Great, those 3 processes. Let's walk through there. That's why all our, like the accelerator and everything else, we just focus on big chunks that methodically work our mind through. Then another one is the schedule, the cost, the risk, procurement across, those little things. We're basically creating like little islands of understanding through here. And while it starts out, to play out the metaphor, as like a sea of like all these processes, like ships like lost in a storm, as we start to get like little areas of certainty, like we start to get these islands, and then like the volume, the waves like calm down, and we start to see things. And from that, we get better at answering questions. So that's the way I look at it. Or you could just study them all in a row, try to memorize it and pray. Like there's 2 paths.
I can't, my brain, I can't handle that. No.
Yeah. Let's use our time better. So that's the way I do it. That's the way I think about it.
I like that way. I think I'm going to follow this process and see where, hopefully by the end of the month, I am, so good that I'm like, okay, bring on the test.
Okay.
Bring it on.
That would be good. Now, that's good. So I think if you follow through, that could be good. Now, the other thing to think through is a lot of times, like, think what we just did. Like, you and I worked together. Like, we were back and forth. Like, I was asking you questions. You were responding. We were thinking, blah, 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 shared minds and stuff.
Yes.
The more and more we can do that with other people, the better things get. Like, because you have a good understanding of certain things. Yeah. Other people have other areas where they're nailing it down. And then like you sharing back and forth or explaining things like how it makes sense in your mind can be helpful back and forth.
Yeah,
so
I love study. I think when I was in college, I studied better with people, but it's kind of different now because, I'm not in college and I'm doing this solo. So that's why I'm trying to get all the other resources out there. That's one of the things I would love to have is like a study group or a study partner.
Yeah.
I think that would help, but
Yeah, no, don't put a but on the end of that. What was the but? The but went, but I can't do it, or what? What was the
No,
but at the end
I
of that?
just I don't know where to find those. That's why I reach out to you. I did cold email to you, and here you are. So I don't know.
So I mean, you got a buddy in me, but like, so I think the thing that is missing, or I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out business, but I think it's you have a problem. I try to solve that problem. Like, I think that's what it is. I like nachos. Somebody makes me nachos. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that's business. I think, and like, that's like human interaction.
I like your analogies.
Yeah. And so, here's the way I think about like studying groups. I was a non-studying groups guy for a long time, and I still am kinda. And so like, I didn't like groups because I didn't like groups that were not serious about groups. And so
Exactly.
the way I met my wife was through a book club in Washington, D.C. Now, I read for this book club. Like, I read the book. I don't remember what the book was, but I read it. And I prepared, and I thought about the analysis. Now, when I showed up at the book club, they just drank, which I'm good at too. So I was prepared on both sides, all right? But they didn't read the book. And so I showed up and go like, hey, I thought we were talking about books. Like, and so the reason why I'm telling you that is just because you're in a group doesn't mean the group's the right group. They could show up,
Right.
hey, we're studying, and they're goofing off. Not
Right.
cool. They could be just, just like I showed up for the book club, they were drinking. Great. But whatever, we want to go to groups where everybody is really focused and is following the same methodology and is not all over the place and doing those kind of things.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And so, but I also like to come to the group. So I think don't be negative, like in the fact that you can study on your own so that when you get in a group, you're ready to go and you have perspective that you can bring.
Yeah.
So I think having both by yourself and with the group is good. Yeah, we have groups in our system. Like, one of the cool things is like, if you look at our, you're still looking at my screen, right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people text me all through the day, but it's cool. The chat, there's like how many people?
You are awesome, Scott. So I'm not surprised about that.
I don't know, but I'm on here. So and so the chats, like I haven't talked in a while, but all these people are going back and forth talking about something. Like apparently they're talking about identified stakeholders. I'm just looking at the picture. Like they're going in and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, like different people just going back and forth. So I think what you're saying is right. Like in our system, we got the chat that's like bing, 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 people going. And what I see is people like pairing up here and going through. So that there are networks and ways for you to get support, like pretty efficiently. Yeah, and then the accelerator thing, we set up little cohorts, little baby groups, 5 or 6 people, and they all meet weekly. And so
with me, with my exam all the way to September 1st, so I do have a lot of time compared to others. My strategy, is there anything else I need to, I could be focusing on using my time more wisely? I know I need to focus a lot on the planning, because I think, what would you recommend? Or, I'm just curious.
Yes, ma'am. And so what I would do, the best training that I've ever done is the accelerator stuff. It's like lessons and lessons and lessons and refining and being on, literally hundreds of these calls with individuals and being like, how do I break through this person? What metaphor is going to work? How do I paint the picture? All that stuff. So like, that's what I've done in the accelerator. So like if we want to know the best way to learn all the content, it's the accelerator videos that I've done. Like that's the best way. And then for you to study, I think the timing is a blessing. Like that you're September 1st and you could potentially pull it earlier. You have enough time to methodically work through the content, find little baby groups, get involved in coaching calls and stuff like that, solve hard questions frequently and, with people that you can do like monitoring, controlling is set up where you can say, I'm going to evaluate how I'm doing. This is where my plan is. This is how I'm doing against it. And you'll have multiple checkpoints where you can get that feedback and understanding. So on a daily basis, the way I think you should structure your study is spend an hour or 2 hours so going into a section, methodically building it out. Like if you have access to the accelerator and stuff, those videos, I think that'll guide you through. I know it will. But if, however you do it, just methodically go through the way that we talked about it, island to island. And then somehow we'll talk about it, how we get you set up with a group, like where you can have some regularity in coming back, where you're like, hey, I'm studying on my own, I'm getting things moving, I'm coming back, I'm taking quizzes live, I'm taking questions live, I'm working through, I'm communicating, trying to teach and learn. And then that regularity keeps you going, because there can be ups and downs in our enthusiasm and our confidence and stuff like that. So